Let me make this a little bit smaller. Okay. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. I'm honored to be here today along with Dr. Chung. Thank you to the API Caucus and the sponsors for inviting us to speak today. Um, our talk is titled Raising Silent Voices, Navigating the Path for API Professionals in Communication Sciences and Disorders. This is such a fitting topic that combines the celebrations for the month of May, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and Speech Language Hearing Month. So we look forward to sharing insights and engaging in a thoughtful dialogue with all of you today. Let's get started. Here are the learner outcomes for today's CEU event. Participants will identify the systemic challenges and barriers that API CSD professionals face in graduate training and clinical practice, including issues related to systemic racism, cultural biases, and underrepresentation. Identify effective strategies and best practices for promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion with CSD, such as mentorship programs and advocacy efforts that support API professionals and other underrepresented groups. Participants will also describe the dual role of cultural and clinical components at play in clinical practice. Disclosures. I am an employee of the University of Washington. Dr. Chung is an employee of the San Diego State University. We have both received an honorarium for this event. We have no relevant non-financial disclosures related to the contents of this presentation. Let's take a moment to preview today's agenda. First, we will briefly define who APIs are. We will then explore the roots and the extent of API underrepresentation. Then focus on empirical findings on 3 areas: current challenges and barriers for API students and professionals in CSD, strategies that have been used, and then focus on the value of diversity in our profession. In the end, we'll have about 20 minutes to open up the floor for your questions and your thoughts. This is an intimate topic for both of us, as we share the identities of being part of the API group and in the CSD profession. To set the stage for today's talk, we want to share our own paths in the profession with you. I'll go first. I've always referred to myself as Chinese Canadian, although this year I have been in the US for 9 years now, so I'm feeling myself aligning more with the Asian American identity. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I've actually immigrated 3 times, twice as a child to China, to Japan and to Canada, and then to the US as a working adult. English is my 3rd language, but my most comfortable language. I'm an adult medical SLP. I work primarily in acute and post-acute care settings with adult patients. I'm an instructor in CSD. I've taught undergraduate and graduate courses in the field. And now I embrace the identity of a researcher, both in CSD and in public health, where I strive to practice culturally responsive research practices every day. Why I wanted to be an SLP really ties into one of my first memories in North America. This is a picture of me and my little brother during one of our first Canada Day, which is like 4th of July. When I came to Canada, I didn't speak a word of English. I felt trapped in my own mind without being able to converse with other kids while going through the motions of other people around me. Eventually, I learned English, but that feeling of disconnect in a world full of communication stuck with me. So when I found out that there was a profession dedicated to helping others communicate, I was immediately hooked. Once I became an SLP, there were 2 core experiences that motivated me to return to school for a doctorate. I had the fortunate experience to teach at the University of Hawaii. And this is one of the photos I took at a outrigger canoe race that I did when I was living there. And I fell in love with the sport and the community. In Seattle, I worked at a skilled nursing facility that centered on providing culturally responsive care for adults from API backgrounds. These work experiences as an SLP, combined with my personal background, got me interested in thinking about how the experience of becoming and being an SLP influences how we see ourselves in the profession. So today, I'm really excited to share some of my findings from my dissertation study in this presentation. Dr. Chung, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. 大家好吗？我的名字叫做刘丽蓉。My English name is Lily Chang. I consider myself a Chinese American. I joined ASHA in 1973. So half a century later, I'm here speaking to you. I've been a professor of speech language pathology for a very long time. And I founded the Chinese Cultural Center at San Diego State University. I also founded the API caucus of ASHA. Later on, I'll tell you why. Those are very important journeys of my life. I also serve as the past president of IALP, also known as the International Association of Logopedics and Phoniatrics. We are celebrating our centennial this year in August in the city of Vienna, the country of Austria, where it all started. I also currently serve as the chair of the Board of Trustees of San Diego Chinese Historical Museum. And you guessed it, you know why I did it. So all these multiple roles of my life help to shape who I am and why I voice my own opinions about being a speech language pathologist, a Chinese American, one of the first to earn a CCC from the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association. Today, I want to tell you, I'm going to serve more as a mentor so that the newly minted Dr. Jin can share with you more about her research. I just want to say that I am ready to get on a train to go to Los Angeles. I will be serving as the commencement speaker for speech language pathology at USC. Let me say it again. USC. Trust me, we are going to celebrate API excellence. Thank you.
Dr. Chung, I'll have you take this slide too to talk about the Asian Pacific Islanders on a global scale.
Yes. Now, the globe is covered with a lot of water and some...
Great, now we're talking about... Oops.
Sorry. So if you look at the land and you can see where China is, China looks like a chicken or a rooster. That's the yellow piece in there. On top of China, we have Mongolia and Russia. Next to China, we have India. If you look at both China and India together, they cover such a large piece of land, but also such a massive number of people. India already surpassed China in terms of population. If you go down more, you will see Southeast Asia, you will see Malaysia, you will see Indonesia, you will see the Philippines, and going even further, you will see a very large Pacific island, Australia, next to it, New Zealand. And then there are so many other Pacific islands, including Micronesia, Polynesia, Melanesia, etc. So we are diverse, we are large, we are heterogeneous. In our collective voices, we are very powerful people here. Maybe you can overlay. Yes, if you put the map of the US of A on top of China, Asia, you can see how big it is. So population-wise, diversity-wise, we really have a lot. 4.3 billion people are in Asia, are in the Pacific Islands. 60% of the world's population live in API regions. We represent over 30 countries and multiple ethnic groups that speak over 100 different languages and actually many more dialects. We have the most populous countries, China and India. We include the world's smallest populations in many of the small islands, including islands like Tonga, etc. So we are a powerful group, and we're celebrating our heritage this month in the United States.
Thank you, Dr. Chung. Despite this rich diversity of the global API community, this is not yet mirrored in communication sciences and disorders profession. And that's what we're going to spend majority of today's time talking about. So let's first take a look at the issues of API underrepresentation in the US and in our field. Asian and Pacific Islanders are the fastest growing minority group in the US. In this graph, you can see the projection of the US population by race from 2005 all the way to 2055. We are right about here in the middle. In the next 20 years, non-Hispanic whites will no longer be the majority race and will make up less than 50% of the US population. We will see the highest population growth among Hispanic and Latinos, shown here in pink, and also Asian Pacific Islanders in the dark green up above. According to the US Census, right now there's approximately 24 million APIs that reside in the US. This fast-growing group continue to experience health disparities. Studies have shown that API children are underidentified and underserviced for special education in US schools. As for adults, there's a disproportionate growth of API residents in nursing homes. A demographic report of nursing homes in the early 2000s found that residents with API backgrounds increased by over 54% in 10 years. In that same period, the number of white residents decreased. Racially minoritized groups, including API populations, are likely to delay seeking healthcare. This may be due to past experiences of discrimination, limited health literacy for navigating our complex healthcare system, and linguistic barriers to accessing the care that they need. So, what is our capacity to support APA populations? Unfortunately, APIs are uniquely underrepresented in communication sciences and disorders, but not so much in other health professions. Therefore, API voices are often, they fall in between not minority enough and not majority enough in minority research. So in communication sciences and disorders, APIs are starkly underrepresented. And in ASHA membership, that consists of speech language pathologists, audiology professionals, assistants, and affiliated members. APIs represent only 3.4%. However, when we turn to membership data about those who are multilingual service providers, APIs make up more than 15%. These factors are what really led, this is one of the factors that led to the founding of the APA caucus. And I think this story is best told by the founder herself. So Dr. Chung, please share more about the beginnings of the APA caucus.
Yes. I joined ASHA many, many years ago, actually before many of you were born. And during the first 10 or so years at ASHA, I wanted to learn more about the organization. And I was actually very fortunate because of my mentors who serve as ASHA presidents and vice presidents and so on. So they invited me to ASHA, to the ASHA headquarters. And it was at that time in Rockville. It is still in Rockville, but in a very different location. While we were deliberating on our needs and on our services, I came up with the idea that for the API populations, We need to caucus. And I remember very, very well, it was a weekend, a very sunny weekend in Rockville. We were talking and we were saying in those days, it's called the Office of Minority Concerns, MC2. We were talking about how we could get our voices heard and so on and so forth. And my only lonely little voice was loud enough. We founded the ASHA API Caucus in 1985. There were only a few people of API background in those days. And over the last so many years, we have grown. Our voices not only needed to be heard, but we also have issues that are very unique and they are related to our communities. Our contributions and services toward the underserved and also the unserved must be understood and must be also appreciated and acknowledged. Our initiatives to mentor and to support those who are from API background must also be stronger. And we have to have a united voice. This voice is ongoing. This work is ongoing. I cannot tell you how proud I am that we are so strong. And today I understand almost 200 people are joining us. But that was 1985. Where will we be 10 years from now? 2024, 2020, 2034, 2035. We must join our hands together and work together.
Thank you, Dr. Chung. The API Caucus has been instrumental in elevating these API voices in our profession. However, as we continue to progress, it's crucial to acknowledge the current challenges and barriers that API individuals still face in our profession. So that's what we'll talk about in the next section. Here I want to introduce broad categories of challenges and barriers that may be experienced by API professionals and students, and possibly from other underrepresented groups as well. We often our challenges are like the elephant in the room, hidden but ever present, and the first step is to call them out, and that's what we're doing today. Some challenges are social cultural. This includes being different from social or cultural norms of Western or American expectations. Linguistic challenges and barriers. This can include differences in language proficiency or different communication styles. These differences in vocabulary, syntax, or even articulation can influence how others are perceived and how you perceive yourself too. Challenges and barriers can also be implicit or explicit. Implicit barriers are not said, but acted upon. An example is the subtlety in admission process that a reviewer may favor one type of candidates that fit a certain profile over others who may have arrived at the profession through an unconventional path. Explicit challenges can be more obvious, and one concrete example of that is a financial burden of applying to and attending graduate programs. Racial challenges can also be explicit, such as the anti-Asian racism that surrounded the COVID pandemic. Here are some common experiences of underrepresentation that has been felt by students and professionals across different health professions. And this is identified in literature in medicine and nursing and physical therapy and so forth. So first is the social cultural barriers, but specifically to program admission and career entry. This includes not knowing how to navigate into the profession because they cannot see themselves reflected in that career path. Once underrepresented students enter the training programs, they experience a limited sense of belonging and othering. As trainees begin growing into the profession, they sense a dissonance or a disconnect between who they are personally and who they're becoming professionally. And in clinical settings, underrepresented members of health professions could sense the effect of their cultural or their racial differences on the therapeutic relationship. Sometimes this is a positive effect, sometimes it's a negative effect. So now we don't see API cited very much in these previous studies in other health professions. What we do know about API experiences is from social sciences and psychology research, more generally in API individuals in education and workplace settings. So API individuals face specific stereotype called perpetual foreign stereotype. This is a persistent perception of API individuals as not from this land, leading to invalidation of their American identity. API individuals also experience different types of microaggressions than individuals from other racial minoritized groups. They are more likely to experience microaggressions that heightens feelings of exclusion. APIs also experience linguistic bias or discrimination based on their language or how they speak. And so how we often think about British accent or European accents is inherently and socially different than how we think about Asian accents in society. So these API experiences in American education and workplace settings, it culminates into internalized racism, where they begin to accept the API individuals, they begin to accept and absorb the negative perceptions of their own race. To top this all off, these experiences are blanketed by the more commonly recognized model minority myth that API individuals are the successful minority. This myth invalidates the experiences of discrimination and marginalization that are beneath the surface. So then what about communication sciences and disorders? Does CSD recognize these challenges? Current efforts in the field has largely focused on increasing diversity. This can include strategies to reduce financial barriers and an equitable admission process so that we can get more diversity in numbers through the door, through the pipeline. There has been emerging literature on underrepresented experiences in the field, and these studies have looked at experiences across group, including underrepresentation in gender, LGBTQIA status, racial identities, and there also have been group-specific studies that looked at African American students and male students in CSD. There have also been increasing calls to action to address the underlying systemic racism embedded in professional policies and standards. While strides are being made, there's more that needs to be done. Particularly, currently, there are not enough inclusion of API experiences and voices in CSD efforts. So this gap in the literature is what motivated me to conduct my dissertation study to explore the API SLP experiences during graduate training and in clinical practice. This was a qualitative phenomenological study. Phenomenology explores the lived experiences of people that share a phenomenon, in this case, being API in speech language pathology. Participants in this study were self-identified as Asian American, started and completed their master's degree in speech pathology in the US, obtained their certificate of clinical competency, and at the time of the interview, worked clinically with adult populations. The qualitative data was collected through one-on-one semi-structured interviews with me over Zoom. And these interviews lasted anywhere between 60 to 120 minutes, averaging approximately 90 minutes. These interviews were recorded and then transcribed. The data analysis used a traditional thematic analysis process. Codes were assigned to excerpts in the transcript, and then thematic structures were developed from these coded excerpts. There was a iterative process with the involvement of the diverse research team. These themes were then shared with the participants for member checking to make sure that the participants that I interviewed saw themselves and their experiences in the final resulting themes. Here are the characteristics of the 26 API SLPs that participated in the study, and I'm going to be sharing their voices with you today. The mean age of participants was 34.4 years, with a large range, and this was intentional to capture individuals at different points in their career. Most participants were female, all participants were Asian, and some identify as biracial, multiracial. On the right side here, you can see a list of participants' heritage ethnicities that are reflected. And on the bottom left corner, there's a list of generation status. Generation status talks about the immigration generation status. So for first generation immigrants, almost half of them, they were born outside of the US and had moved to the US sometime in their lifetime. And then the rest were second or later generation, meaning that they're born in the US, but it was their parents or their grandparents or more that had moved to the US from an Asian country. All but 3 participants spoke at least one other language besides English. Participants' mean years since graduating from their master's degree in speech pathology was 8.6 years, again with a large range. All of them worked with adults in some capacity, and nearly half of them worked in the hospital setting. The API SLPs came from all over the country, but the West Coast was more represented. So the resulting themes and sub-themes from my conversations with API SLPs highlighted some of the challenges and barriers that API SLPs face. Particularly, these challenges and barriers related the most with the process of coming into the profession during their graduate training. This encompassed their experiences in the classroom and also in the clinic as a trainee. There are also some race and language specific experiences that posed as barriers. In the next slides, I will share direct quotes from the API SLPs to illustrate some of these challenges and barriers that I've just listed. Overall, API SLPs shared a wide range of experiences about their graduate training. Many shared positive feedback about the program itself and the quality of their learning. Some shared explicit racist experiences, which we will dig into later on. However, a common experience across most participants was this pressure to assimilate, which one person described as trying to be more American. This was expressed by API SLPs regardless of their actual generation status or how long they were in the US. Participant 9, who is first generation and came to the US as an international student, said, "You just have to fake it until you make it. You can't show people that you're not from here." Participant 16 is a second generation Asian American who was born and raised in the US. Despite growing up in the US, she said, "I had to mold myself. You have to fit in with the group. I have learned what being American is throughout my educational experiences, including graduate school." Participant 21 is a fourth generation Asian American, meaning that it was her great grandparents that came to the US. She said, "I felt like I had that pressure, and I was already somewhat assimilated. I can chameleon my way into the American culture." Another resonating experience across participants was a level of discomfort and hesitancy to raise their minoritized perspectives. One person shared her experience in a cultural competency related class where she was the only Asian in a class of white peers. She said, "I'm not from Asia. I was born here. I thought it was really awkward just every time there's a Chinese culture or a Korean culture. The professor looks at me and asks, 'Is this what your family does?' I didn't really like being the spokesperson for all Asian culture, but I was also afraid of the professor." Similarly, another participant summarized her graduate training experience in this way. She said, "I was very much a subject of the program, which often meant that I operated within the biases and the values of the people running the program. I was constantly questioning how much I wanted to stir the pot or just keep my head down, get my degree, and get out. Another important aspect of graduate experience that I've categorized here into in the classroom, but really extends beyond the reach of the classroom walls, and it's the social component of graduate school. Largely, API-SLP said the academic side of things was not difficult. They expected the rigor and the hard work involved in attaining their degrees. What was challenging was the social adjustment, including building friendships. Participant 4 said when it came to school, everyone had to do group projects or whatever collaboration. That was okay. It was more of the social aspect of it, having friendships outside of the academics. That was more isolating. Many of the participants had good friends in the program and they had great lifelong relationships, but they felt separated from the majority group of their peers. Regardless of whether they found a friend in the program or not, 13 out of the 26 people I interviewed, half of them described the loneliness and the sense of isolation in their graduate experience. One person described graduate experience as a lonely endeavor. In a matter of fact tone, they used words like anomaly, misfit, oddball, and even unicorn to describe themselves. This sense of loneliness was heightened when they shared other intersecting underrepresented identities, such as age, whether they're a mature student or younger student, gender, LGBTQ plus identity, or immigration status. In the clinic was another area where API students felt their differences were highlighted. One source of racial tension came from their relationships with their direct clinical supervisors. This was either a great relationship or a vulnerable one. One SLP, API SLP, described these as tension with the authority role. In the quotes I'll share, the API SLPs felt that their differences were emphasized and not supported in the process of clinical training. Participant 11 said this of her first clinical placement. My supervisor did not let me lay hands on her students until a couple months later, until my department intervened. She actually said, I spoke like her students, the pediatric clients that they're working with. That was horrible when I think about it. I still feel like, oh, hurtful. Another person reflected on what made her different from her peers in the training process. All my girlfriends are like, I don't get it. We have her as our instructor. She doesn't tell us these things. So again, you do a lot of introspection. What am I doing wrong? I invested in you. You guys invested in me. Why aren't you supporting? Why are you putting me down? The second source of racial tension in the clinic came from clients and patients that they were working with and the limited support for navigating this as part of the clinical training. Participant 22 said, I would have an interaction with a patient that was very racist. I didn't always necessarily feel like bringing up race-based issues with supervisors because I guess I just felt like they wouldn't understand. In another example, participant 14, he said, one of the patients at the time said derogatory words towards me regarding my race. That supervisor was not very helpful. They said, it's okay, I'll see the person. They didn't provide any support towards myself, towards how to transition or deal with it. It was just kind of like pushed under the rug. And sometimes not saying something also says something. The challenge of these clinical trainee experience is that these racialized experiences do not stop once the API SLPs start working. The API SLPs share that the initial encounters with a new client or the new patient were times where they experienced the most microaggressions or even explicit racist comments. Participant 16 said, initially, I'm definitely judged by my race. People are like, what are you? Or where is your name from? I get that a lot. Most of the people I interviewed shared similar experiences of being confronted about who they are racially. Another common phrase that came up is, where are you from? They have to grin and laugh it off when they introduce themselves. So the consequence of this is described by the next person. She said, it sometimes catches me off guard, no matter how many times I get it, these microaggressions. It just throws me off. Oh, you don't even see me as an SLP first. You don't even see me as a healthcare provider first. You just see me as an Asian. All in all, these challenges and barriers in the classroom and in the clinic, it sends the API SLPs a subliminal message that creates this inner dialogue of internalized bias. One specific bias in our field of communication sciences disorders is linguistic bias. That above all else, in order to succeed as a clinician, SLPs need to have quote, a perfect command of standardized English. And this is what one of the participants said. This internalized perspective is expressed by the API SLPs regardless of their actual native English proficiency. Participant 10 is a native English speaker. She said, unfortunately, we're stuck in this field where sometimes your mastery of how you pronounce and how you articulate in English is more important than where you went to school and how long you've been working. Participant 25 is, I believe, a third or fourth generation immigrant, but she said, I don't look like English should be native to me. And participant 11, who learned English later in her life, said, my accent, that was my greatest fear as a student, as an SLP. So certainly the API SLPs have shared their challenges, but they're not without strategies to navigate through these obstacles. What we know from the literature on the experiences of underrepresented and minoritized health professionals is that there are strategies that we have used to get through these challenging times. The first one is ignoring or laughing off discriminatory experiences, that it's not a big deal. The next is staying silent. These two are both learned coping behaviors and strategies to maintain focus on the training or the work. Minoritized individuals have attributed this success to their character of resilience and perseverance, as it's what's allowing them to keep going in the face of hardship. Other things that have been yearned after and have been reported to be helpful are the supportive mentorship relationships and accessing and seeking peer support. All of these strategies are also used by API SLPs. And before I go into my study, I want to have Dr. Chung share where you can find these stories in another source.
Yes, I cannot stress enough the importance of having mentors or the importance of becoming a mentor. Over the years, I have been so lucky to have many mentors, and I've also served as mentors to many. This book, which is entitled Becoming an Exceptional API Leader, Intimate Stories from 15 Silent Voices Change Makers. I hope Mei-Ling Chang is with us this evening. You can look at this cover page and see the many wonderful smiles. Included in this, we have a deaf person in the middle and in the center column underneath Mei-Ling. We raise our voices. We have been mentored, and we are mentoring. The power of one is important. The power of many is even more strong. So if you have not had a chance to look at this book, I would urge you to read stories, including very intimate stories about my life and my many decades of twists and turns. And I want to thank all the people who have made a contribution to this book, including your co-chair, Shin, who wrote a reflection after she read the book. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I wanted to share more of these individual stories of the strategies that API students and SLPs used. These included building the positive mentorship relationships. Another was the sense that I have to prove myself, meaning that I have to work harder. And then finally, seeing the value of their lived experiences of who they are in the profession. So, similarity across positive mentorship experiences was the idea that the API SLP can use that mentoring connection to start envisioning themselves in their mentor's path. That included being able to connect with this mentor outside of the job stuff, the clinical aspects. Here are two descriptions of what the API SLP said. And so participant 9 said, one thing I learned from my mentor since the beginning is not just clinical stuff. She taught me how to be a clinician, how to carry myself as a person. Another person said, this mentor, he was easier to talk to about things beyond the strictly job-related stuff. More of those emotional experiences, those human experiences. There was also that comfort level to talk about some of those racist experiences. So there were some mentors that participant 22 felt bringing up these racial experiences in the clinic. Another strategy that came up frequently from the API SLPs was the need to work hard to prove themselves. Reflecting on her academics, participant 2 said, I knew that I had to study very hard, and I have to spend double, even 3 times effort to study compared to other English native speakers. This was also relevant in the clinical realm. Participant 9 said, being Asian, you still encounter racist patients who will question your credibility or your background because you look like this. In comparison to white therapists, they don't get questioned as much. They don't have to prove themselves as much. What I want to talk more about and where I really saw the light and the pride in the API SLPs is when they started to talk about what value they add as professionals. First, they saw the value of their multilingualism. I see value, and the clients see value in me being able to provide therapy in their first language. It's just one less layer of needing to be interpreted. So they enjoy that direct communication. They saw how they're able to integrate their cultural and content expertise in providing therapy. If patients are eating congee, that's a mix between, it's not quite pureed because it could be kind of mushy. And this is relating to dysphagia management, where we're looking at diet textures. So knowing cultural food items and being able to provide counseling on dysphagia based on those cultural foods that they eat every day helped to allow for dysphagia management in a culturally responsive way. Another one is this person said, you realize certain clinical questions aren't fair because you're basing it on English American culture and not on their culture. So being able to critically evaluate how culture fits into the therapy allow the API SLP to accurately assess and accurately to appropriately counsel their clients and patients. So that brings us to the next section on the value of diversity. It goes without saying that the general value of diversity is recognized across health professions. It's one of the reasons why we need more people from racially minoritized or underrepresented backgrounds to join the healthcare workforce. What we don't spell out very much is the why behind it. One of the reasons stems from this idea of concordance, which simply means similarity or shared identity. We know that provider characteristics and knowledge can influence patient experiences in receiving healthcare. So in medicine, research has looked closely at racial concordance for improving health outcomes. But this research is largely inconsistent on the evidence. Some studies say racial matching between the patient and the provider, that if the patient and provider are from the same race, that works and it improves health outcomes. Some other studies say no, not necessarily. However, there's merit in that sense of concordance or that sameness, which can help build connection. But what I gather from this inclusive evidence so far is that we cannot stop short at race matching. More research is needed on the beneficial factors of concordance. So we can think about the idea of cultural concordance or communication concordance. It's more about knowledge and what you're going to do with that knowledge than just skin color. So once API SLPs began to work with clients and patients in the communities, they began to see their lived experiences integrate with the clinical work. And this was reflected in their cultural connections and their language connections. When I asked participants how being Asian, coming from API background has affected their clinical practice, they told me about how it influenced their interaction with other API clients or patients. These clients, they felt that they're on the same team in therapy, and one person referred to it as the patients, they see me as one of their kind. Another sentiment was like these the API clients, they appreciate. Participant 16 said, when I tell my patients my ethnicity, they're ready. They know. They know how my family operates, that my upbringing was very similar to theirs. They don't have to explain everything to me. When they share the same API identity, one SLP commented that he's able to use the we language. For example, saying, in our country, we don't talk about autism or we don't talk about dementia. And so participant 14 said, when I use more of that we kind of language, it was a little bit easier to relate to. It might hit something that they know or they're familiar with. It's a lot easier for that buy-in. Even when API SLPs weren't working with someone from the same background, they reflected on their own minoritized identity and experiences to connect with their clients. One example being countering generalization. This person said, I don't want people to look at me, see that I'm a Chinese person, and treat me like a Chinese person. There are so many different things about different Chinese people, and the key is really being responsive to the person that you're treating. Living biculturally, APIs also learn to adapt to both Asian API and American cultures. In words like Korean American or Japanese American, there's usually a hyphen between the two words. And one person used a hyphenated identity to describe how she operates as an SLP. She said, there are times in this field, I feel like that hyphen where I'm nothing. I'm neither Korean nor American unless my patient wants me to be. I learned to adapt one way or the other. And this was a strength for her. While API SLPs focused on the English proficiency during their clinical training and early in their clinical career, working with diverse populations have expanded them to think about their multilingualism. Being able to treat patients in another language became a source of pride. Participant 1, after a few years of practicing as an SLP and meeting a client that speaks her language for the first time, said, it was the first time I feel that my skills are really unique because none of the other therapists can speak the two languages that she speaks. I was very proud that I could speak both. I was like, oh my goodness, no one else can do this. Achieving direct communication is not necessarily speaking one person's mother tongue, but by respecting and honoring how our clients and patients want to be communicated to and in what language. So this is talking about the clients who are listed as speaking a different language, where English is not listed as their first language. These people, they do speak English and don't like to have interpreters. They have enough English to have conversations and to understand their condition. So honoring their preference is important, regardless of what their native language is. Even when API SLPs felt that they would not classify themselves as a bilingual service provider, they felt that their conversational understanding helped to bridge the gap in connecting with their clients. So participant 8 said, I would not call myself a bilingual SLP, but because I can speak her language conversationally, it helps to bridge the gap for a lot of these patients. For these patients, there's a comfort level in that these people, the healthcare providers, they can speak my language. That helps a lot. And another example, participant 25 said, I understand a lot more than I can speak. So I could tell when the interpreters messed up. I'll stop him and say, that's not what the client said. So the interpreter knows that I'm listening at the same time. Even though I don't speak as well as I could, I do understand enough to correct things. And that level of detail is really important in our field. Closing remarks. So I closed off my findings on a positive note, but let's revisit some of the key points from this presentation on navigating the path of APIs in CST. So first, racialized experiences of API, CST professionals and students, they are currently under-recognized. And this is partially cultural. So many Asian cultures value stoicism. There's a phrase in Chinese, 吃苦, which literally means eat bitterness. And so we commend each other for not complaining, for working hard and swallowing the bitterness. However, our stories are then untold and our voices are then quieted. Disciplinary focus on speech and language also introduces a very specific bias when combined with the stereotypes that API individuals face, particularly related to speech and language. We are in the business of helping others communicate, yet we need to address the deep settled bias we may still present towards our clients and how they speak, but not just our clients, but towards our colleagues, towards our trainees. There's also such diversity in API identity. There's diversity in generation status, in language background, in heritage ethnicity. And also, the API identity is only a part of who we are, and each one of us must also navigate the other identities that we hold. Finally, I urge you to rethink and redefine differences. What makes us different and unique are more valuable as assets, not deficits. Oops, went too far. And I want Dr. Chang to add to this by talking about paradigm shifts.
Yes. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation on a study that is really overdue. I am encouraging everyone to dig into your own background and ask those questions and be proud of who you are, how multiply complicated you are. You are one person. You are a whole person. I also wanted to comment about the notion of gross generalization and also the notion of stereotyping one way or another. In the book that I presented earlier, I propose gently some paradigm shifts. And these shifts came to me as I experienced different types of racism, different types of hostility, and also different types of empowerment and mentorship. So I want each one of you to think. We should not be reactive to what's happening. We should always be proactive. If we look at a situation as disability, I think we are better off to focus on strength and ability. As Dr. Jin just said, if we look at ourselves or our clients or patients from the deficit angle, we're not going to go very far. But if we can collectively look at the asset, we also don't want to be negative to think about ourselves as minorities being minor, but to be more positive about our positions. We don't want to reject who we are. We want to accept who we are. We also want to go beyond normative data and look at individual uniqueness. Another important paradigm is we're not treating people so much as we are facilitating communication. Besides looking at the norms or the sameness, we should celebrate diversity and neurodiversity. We don't want to be excluded as outsiders or the others. We want to be included. We want to be invited. We can never be indifferent. We need to continue to grow our compassion. Not only should we be empathetic toward people with communication challenges, we need to empower them. We need to let them sign the sign, talk the talk, walk the walk. We must take stigma away from people. We must honor each and everyone we encounter. We also should not feel that we're trapped by being disenfranchised. We need to always encourage ourselves and others to be the best you can be. We look at ourselves as individuals, but we are in a community. Where is your village? We do not want to feel isolated, as some of the people in the study said. We need to be more engaged. We not only want to confirm our own existence and value, we must advocate that we add value to many, many situations and conditions. We are not invisible. We are totally visible. We may be shy, but we are visible. We are not silent. We are vocal, and we can sign the sign and talk the talk. We may not be typical, but we should respect atypical. From all the prejudices that we talked about, we can also continue to acknowledge our own existence, our multiplicity, and our values that we add to the complex picture of service providers. This is very, very important. I also want to give you a very sneak preview to the commencement speech I will be giving proudly at USC. Part of this very short piece is I grew up in Taiwan with the typhoons and the earthquakes. I grew up with papayas and mangoes. I grew up on a farm of sugar canes. The sign of Taiwan, there are two. One is the shape of Taiwan, which looks like a yam. This is the sign for Taiwan. The other sign for Taiwan is the chewing of sugar cane, like this. So I want to share that with you. My grandfather told me, what is the purpose of sharing a pair of chopsticks? If you belong to the chopstick culture, if you know the kanji culture, you know how important it is to use a pair of chopsticks. But what is the purpose of sharing a pair of chopsticks to everyone here tonight? It is so that he or she can share a bowl of rice with you. So I want to urge everyone to think, and from knife and fork to a pair of chopsticks. When you put a lot of chopsticks together, you cannot break them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chung. And speaking of mentorship and importance of mentorship, here are some resources for accessing mentorship opportunities for API individuals in CSD, regardless of where you are in your path to the profession. If you are in a capacity to serve as a mentor, as Dr. Chung mentioned, I urge you to participate. And if you're looking for a mentor, here are places that you can go to. The API Caucus has a mentorship program. The Asian Pacific Society of Speech Language Hearing Mentor-Mentee Network. This is actually where I met Dr. Chung. So this is just, an example of the positive mentorship relationship that we've created from these resources. There is the ASHA Minority Student Leadership Program for students. The STEP program is for clinicians, and the Academic and Research Mentoring Network is for researchers and academicians. So parting thoughts for the underrepresented, whether you are one or you know one, we see you. You're not alone. Your tribe is out there, and we encourage you to go get connected. I have heard so many similar stories of when I interview the API SLPs, and each of them was wondering what others were saying, even though each of them had such similar stories to tell. Who you are matters. You are not just your degree or your expertise. The person that worked hard to get that degree and all of your life experiences matter. It matters to the clients that you're treating, and it matters to who you will become. And finally, I wanted to share one last quote from one of the API SLPs that I spoke with. And I asked each one of them to give advice to their younger self or to current students. And one person said, don't feel pressure to fit a mold, but instead find your own strength. So that is the end of our presentation, but it's the beginning of our conversation. We would love to open up the floor for any commentary or questions.
Yeah, I just saw a comment from Costa Rica, Pura Vida, very important, beautiful. There is a very large, wonderful Chinese Costa Rican community. I was just there. I'm so proud that someone shared the Costa Rican relationship and heritage. Thank you so much. I think we should all give ourselves a round of applause for being here, for being and celebrating Asian Heritage Month. Thank you.
I think we have a couple of questions, one in the Q&A. What resources do you recommend for non-API SLPs to learn more about being respectful and inclusive other than talks like this in the books mentioned already?
Would you like me to take that?
Yes, I think,
Yes.
don't you, or don't we have a list of references?
Yes, I was gonna say the API Caucus. They have such amazing references and lists on their website of different cultures that you can look at. Yeah, so I feel like maybe Shane, you can speak more to the resources that you have.
Yeah, let me share what I have.
Yes.
Oh, actually, it says Archie would like to answer this question live.
No,
Good.
sorry, I wanted you guys to answer it. I just clicked that it's going to be answered live.
Okay.
I wanted to share the API Caucus website. Maybe I can share my screen just a little bit. So on the Caucus website, we have, if you have a chance to check it out, we have listed a few different programs that we have developed over the years. The first one is what we have done in the past couple of years to celebrate the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we have the anti-racism learning community that we meet periodically over the years. We have a career panel. We just created the API Caucus Research and Clinical Symposium, and we are gonna have the symposium held on May 20th.
Saturday,
25th.
May 25th.
25th. Thank you. The email will on the Caucus newsletter, you should be able to see that and make sure that you register. We have several outstanding presentations, including Lena's presentation. So she'll be presenting for us one more time. And we also have the graduate school panel. I think there are 2 videos on how to help students to apply for a graduate program in the US. We also have the mentorship program like the presenters talked about. We also have a scholarship opportunity for students every year. We also have social hours and APS speaker series like we are having right now. And there are also other resources available if you check out our resources. So we have put a lot of work on our caucus website, so feel free to come and check out, and also the donation page, and then also our store. We have a store that you can purchase merchandise from us. And we also have the new, like on the news tab, you're gonna see a lot of events coming up. And we're pretty good at updating them. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to say that API Caucus, the API Caucus has done just a tremendous amount of work. All of you have done so very much. Your collective efforts and wisdom has touched me very, very deeply. I am so very proud of all of you. So happy that you are with us.
Yeah, and Archie and I, we just checked out our membership number. We have 2275.
Growing.
So there's a question or something in the chat that someone said, thank you for sharing this very important work. Do you have any suggestions or references for how to support API students in their clinical experiences and externships when clients make a racist comment or perpetrate microaggressions? And how can we best educate and support supervisors when their students experience this?
I will take a stab at this. Perhaps my suggestion is we actually stage such a dialogue and just get all these different types of microaggression out and see how we can learn to dialogue using the guiding principles of equity, which is number 1, we have to be very honest. Number 2, we have to be equal. Number 3, we have to be respectful. Number 4, we have to show great empathy. Number 5, we have to let our hypothesis come out. These steps have to be used and practiced and rehearsed and practiced. So dialoguing is a very important part of our training. However, I noticed myself that when I was growing up, a lot of times I remember being talked to, not being talked with. So I've been learning how to do dialoguing. And it is from the Greek perspective, dia, D-I-A, that part means piercing, piercing through, deep diving. Log is the use of language. So when you use the language to get to the truth, that is truly a dialogue. Again, equity, being equal, respectful, listening carefully, and having enough empathy for each other, and looking at each other as equal partners in this conversation. So perhaps the best way to do it is to provide some scenario and practice. I hope that you can be empowered by the power of true dialogue, by the power of true piercing, deep diving dialogue. And we can all become better dialoguers if we learn how to do it.
I think the reality, I just want to add a little bit. I think the reality is that these racist comments are going to happen. And so it's about more of preparing the students and how to react in that setting, just like Dr. Chung said, than saying that it's not going to happen, because that's going to throw them off once they go in the field and they're alone. So clinical training is a great time to practice how to react, how to respond, so that they are more confident when they're in that situation later on down the road.
I agree, because the silent voices are voices. You don't hear them. Let's practice a little bit more raising our silent voices. Silent voices are true voices. They're just silenced. We must learn to practice true dialoguing. And once we begin to really practice, because I realize that myself, and I am so enamored with the notion that I can be an equal partner in this. But sometimes I pause. When I pause, it is not because I am silent. When I pause, it is because I'm trying to add energy so that I can come back, be a calm, empathetic, equal, respectful partner in communication, in dialoguing.
And if I may, I just wanted to add just a little bit. On the ASHA Code of Ethics, it does state that we do have to respect culture and accent. So that's also one of the things that's, if you have your Cs, if people have their Cs or their basically they need to abide by the Code of Ethics. So if you do see that someone is not abiding by those Code of Ethics, then we can have that dialogue with them and have that conversation that they need to be following the Code of Ethics.
Yeah, it is the microaggression. It is the implicit. It is sometimes implied. It's sometimes the facial expression, not even said, okay, that you can sense a certain degree of hostility or certain degree of being looked down and because this person speaks with a foreign accent, and so on and so forth. So the respect has to be there. We need to practice it. We need to practice being respectful. We need also to practice how to be a good dialoguer. We also need to to practice how to find ourselves on an equal footing. It's very important to practice, and it will be perfect. All the times you think about it, you can do it. You can do it.
There's also another question. Do you or anyone know of a bilingual clinician network? I know there has been some answer about contacting on our social media, but we didn't know if you know of any other additional resources.
Resources for what?
For a bilingual clinician network, where individuals might be able to refer someone to or find individuals who speak a different language, clinicians.
I think ASHA has many different channels of doing that. Do you think you can go to an ASHA page and look at, and we also have so many special interest groups. Do you know about them? I hope you do.
I know that there is a bilingual SLP Facebook group,
Yes.
and I've seen similar clinical examples where you want to refer someone to someone that might be bilingual.
And I know that there's a Korean SLP Facebook group. I think they established it like 5 years ago. It's been very active.
Yeah, there is also a Mandarin speaking group that is using actually a platform called WeChat, and it's a very busy and crowded space. But again, if you happen to use WeChat, that group is available. Dr. Jin, do you have that WeChat information that you can put on the chat?
Not right away, but
Later we can probably.
yes, we can follow up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a San Francisco Bay Area Chinese speaking SLP group. I think they have a face. Oh, yeah, it's a Facebook group. That you could request if your need is on Mandarin Chinese. Yeah, thank you, Nadia. The Asha profile. I was thinking about that, but I forgot the full name for it. I think you can enter a language and see if you could find someone in your area that speaks that language for your therapy needs.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Thank you, Nadia. Or has anybody found any like very helpful resources that we haven't talked about at the presentation or in the chat that you would like to share, and then we can collect them and put them together on our newsletter?
I received a direct message question, so I'll read it out loud. It says, Dr. Jin, other than what you already mentioned, were there any other key main points your participants emphasized as part of your study? I think there was such wide range. Some felt that they had a great experience and great training. One thing I didn't mention in this presentation is the people that did have great experiences, they always had to add one more phrase to it, which is I'm lucky. So they would say, yeah, I had this great training experience, had these great mentors, but that's because I'm lucky, or because my school is progressive, or I'm fortunate to have this. So there is this recognition that that is not the norm, and they don't take that positive experience for granted either. Another thing is that paradigm shift, right? So during graduate training experience, there's a lot of self-doubt. And I know as a trainee, there's self-doubt in many ways, regardless of API identity. But it was when they started working clinically that they reshaped the self-doubt into assets, into resources. So this is just a discussion point, but how do we bring that confidence and that asset into the training process so they can begin to plant seeds of their value in the training process and not to discover it years down the road?
Yeah, I also want to say that we have a dissertation from Dr. Jin. We hope to see more efforts continuing. I have had the opportunity to work with many API SLP students who were having difficulties during their CF or even getting to the CF. And so this is one area I think the API caucus can be effective and to reach to those students who are in training, who may be going through tremendous hardship. Some of the cases, I would have to tell you, they still give me nightmares still today. And many were so discouraged that they did not finish their CF. So I hope that the 2,275 of us we will continue to increase, but also we'll be able to start with a little bit earlier in our work rather than becoming fully fledged ASHA members. The student group is where we need to probably spend even more time on. I hope this agenda item can be discussed at your board meetings and consider this so that we don't lose the values. We are value added to the association, but mostly to the people who need our services. As you look at the increase of numbers of people in the United States, and most recently, you know that I'm in San Diego. We're at the border, the La Frontera. We see so many people coming over across the border, and so many are from the API regions. I know some of them will need our services. And so we need to give opportunities to more students who are in training, not to give up, to continue, to also seek opportunities to become a CF and eventually fully certified. I think that is a great agenda to look at. And this is only the beginning of a major doctoral research. I'm sure we can do more. We can ask deeper questions and we can find out more data. I think it's very helpful to be able to continue this type of deep dive and deep discourse. Jenny, how nice. I see that. Yeah. I volunteer at a future time to actually do scenario analysis and do practice. We also help our students to do mock interviews, right? I know some of our doctoral students had to go for job interviews. We help them. We help them stage the show and so on. I think we can start earlier. As I said earlier, I personally notice my own situation in the sense that if we take from a Greek perspective, from the Socrates, from the Plato's and those people, the mentors and mentees, the mentor happened in Europe, actually happened in Greece. So the mentoring took place in Europe many thousands of years ago. And dialoguing also is in a European tradition. I hope we, the API caucus, can look at this carefully because we are part of the American Speech and Language and Hearing Association. We are situated in the United States with a very strong European tradition. We all need to practice. We all need to become better. We all need to raise our silent voices, but we need to know when and where to do it. And so practice makes perfect. So we need to do more of it. I'm just raising this issue because I am currently a student in the learning of the dialogue. I'm currently a student because during COVID, I found time to study it. So I'm becoming better and better myself in dialoguing. I hope all of you will be the same way, will love to dialogue with empathy, inclusion, respect, equality, deep dive, and hypothesis. I hope you can all do that.
And Jenny, I just wanted to acknowledge your question, the question being how to approach conversations regards to microaggressions or racism in the clinical settings in classrooms. I don't have the answer, but I just wanted to acknowledge that there is a power divide between being the student and being the department. So that is one challenge, right? And all of what Dr. Chung said is true, but I just want to acknowledge that there is that struggle because of that barrier, because of the power differences.
Actually, many of us are, I serve in the dean's office also, professors and faculty members, even department chair. We have the power to change the paradigm. students also have the power. I don't mean to challenge. I don't believe in the kind of confrontation that will resulted in a lot of, how should I say, a lot of anger. I believe that we can manage our conversations and dialogues. And when you know you are being discriminated against, do not remain silent. You can use what I call assertive training, which is the sandwich approach, okay? If you eat sandwiches, because many of us rather have kanji. So the layer is you have a piece of bread or something like that, and you have something in the middle, and then you have a piece of bread at the end. So let me just give you the strategy, okay? You say, I hear you, I understand where you're coming from. But when you said this about me or this clinical encounter, that's the centerpiece, that's the sandwich part, the meat or the tuna or whatever. You made me feel quite uncomfortable. You made me feel that I'm less than who I am. This is how I feel. I want to let you know. And you end up with another piece of bread. But I understand where you're coming from, that you may have a different perspective. I do understand that. So the centerpiece in that sandwich, that piece in the middle, you actually are being assertive, and you actually say, you made me feel little, and you made me feel bad. You can say that, but you can couch it in a sandwich approach. Let it out. Be assertive, but in a gentle way, the sandwich approach.
And with that being said, thank you for that suggestion, and that and Lina and Lily, thank you for this phenomenal presentation. Thank you, ASLIS, for the ASL interpretation service. Thank you to our sponsors and attendees for making this event possible. We hope that you learned a lot about AAPI professionals and how they can navigate the CSD path. A course certificate and ASHA CU link are now in the chat box. Please complete the ASHA CE form by Friday, May 31st. Please consider joining the API caucus on Saturday, May 25th, as Xinhui mentioned earlier, for our first research and clinical symposium. It's another free event, and it definitely highlights our members' work. We are also so proud to share that our very own API caucus co-president, Dr. Xinhui Xin Cho, has been nominated for the ASHA Board of Directors for SLP at large. So please take a look at the candidates and consider voting for Xinhui or Xin. And then, did you learn a lot from the event today? We hope that you did, and that you will consider financially supporting the caucus so that we can continue to offer free CU courses. Any amount of donation will be much appreciated, and thank you so much. On behalf of the API Speech Language Hearing Caucus, we wish you stay healthy, happy, and safe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.